The train lurched to a stop, and Eleanor Grace's fingers went white around the crumpled letters. Through the dust-streaked window, she saw him 6'5" of raw muscle and shadow, standing alone on that godforsaken platform like judgment itself. This was the man who'd written her poetry about prairie sunsets. The man who'd promised her safety, a home, a future. The same man whose eyes now locked onto hers with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. Before we dive into Eleanor's journey, please subscribe to our channel and stay with us until the very end of this story. Comment below with your city, so I can see how far this tale has traveled. Now, let's begin. Eleanor had read Garrett Stone's letters 47 times. The paper had gone soft as cloth under her fingers, the ink fading where her tears had fallen. She'd memorized every word, every loop of his rough handwriting, every promise he'd made about Montana and loneliness and second chances. He'd never mentioned his size. "Lord have mercy," Mrs. Hartwell whispered beside her. The older woman's fan had stopped moving. That cannot be him. But Eleanor knew it was. She'd studied the single photograph he'd sent a formal portrait shoulders, only his face serious and his eyes careful. The photograph hadn't captured the scale of him. How could it? How could paper and ink show that a man could be built like something from mythology, like the giants her father used to read about before the consumption took him? The other passengers were staring. A mother pulled her children back from the window. Two men in business suits exchanged glances that said they wouldn't want to meet Garrett Stone in a dark alley. Or a lit one, for that matter. Eleanor's corset suddenly felt too tight. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the hammering of her heart. 3 days on this train. 3 days of Mrs. Hartwell's warnings about men who lied in letters about frontier roughness, about respectable women who'd gotten off trains and never been heard from again. Eleanor had smiled and nodded and clutched her copy of Jane Eyre and told herself Garrett was different. Now she wasn't sure of anything except that she had $4.30 left to her name, and that wasn't enough to get her back to Boston. The porter opened the door. Heat rolled in like something alive, stealing what little air remained in Eleanor's lungs. Montana in August. She'd read about the heat but hadn't believed it. Boston had never felt like this, like the sun wanted to press you flat into the earth. "Miss—" The porter offered his hand. Eleanor stood, her legs shook. She'd sold her mother's cameo for the train ticket, her father's watch for traveling clothes. She'd told everyone at the boarding house that she was going west to marry a rancher, had endured their pitying looks and whispered predictions that she'd be back within a month. She couldn't go back. There was nothing to go back to. She took the porter's hand and stepped onto the platform. Garrett Stone was 20 feet away, then 15, then 10. Other passengers melted out of his path like they could sense something dangerous in him, something that couldn't be reasoned with. He moved with surprising grace for someone so large, each step deliberate and controlled. 5 feet. Eleanor tilted her head back and back. His shadow fell over her like nightfall. "Miss Grace." His voice was exactly as she'd imagined it, deep enough to feel in her chest. "I'm Garrett Stone." Up close, he was even more overwhelming. His shoulders blocked out the sun. His arms were thick as fence posts, his hands scarred and calloused. A jagged line cut through his left eyebrow, pulling it into a permanent skeptical arch. Dark stubble covered his jaw, and his hair was too long, curling past his collar like he'd forgotten to cut it. Or didn't care. But his eyes. Gray as storm clouds, yes, but gentle. Searching her face like he was afraid of what he'd find there. "I know," Eleanor managed. Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. "Your letters were true. Every word." He glanced past her at the porter unloading her trunk. "You came alone." "I have no family, Mr. Stone. I told you that." "You did." Something flickered across his face. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction. "And it's Garrett. We're to be married." Mrs. Hartwell inserted herself between them like a cavalry charge. "Now see here, young man. I'm 34, ma'am. Garrett's attention hadn't left Eleanor's face. Not young. And Miss Grace, if you changed your mind, I'll buy you a return ticket right now. You can get back on this train. No questions. Eleanor's heart stopped. Here it was. Her escape. She could climb back aboard, ride 3 days back to Boston, find work as a governess or a seamstress, live in a cramped room and save pennies and die alone 30 years from now, unmissed and unmourned. Or she could trust the letters. Trust the man who'd written about building her bookshelves and teaching her to ride and how he'd never met a woman who read Wordsworth. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them against her skirts. I haven't changed my mind. His shoulders dropped. Just slightly, but enough that Eleanor realized he'd been holding tension she hadn't noticed. Then let's get your trunk and go home. Home? Mrs. Hartwell's voice climbed higher. Sir, you cannot simply take this woman to your home unwed. The proprieties. The nearest preacher's 3 days' ride. Won't be back through Crimson Ridge for a week. Garrett picked up Eleanor's trunk one-handed, like it weighed nothing, like it was full of feathers instead of every worldly possession she owned. Miss Grace'll stay at my ranch till he arrives. Separate room, lock on the door, only she controls it. That is highly irregular. Ma'am, this is Montana. Garrett shifted the trunk to his shoulder. Nothing here's regular. He offered Eleanor his free arm. She stared at it. At the forearm thick with muscle and corded with veins and covered in old scars. At the hand that could probably wrap completely around her waist. She took it. His arm beneath her gloved fingers felt like sun-warmed stone. Solid, immovable. He walked slowly, adjusting his long stride to match hers, and Eleanor became acutely aware that every person on that platform was watching them. The giant and his mail-order bride. What a spectacle. They're staring, she whispered. Always do. His jaw tightened. Ignore 'em. Do they fear you? He glanced down at her, surprised. Some. Why? I'm not friendly. Don't have time for it. You were friendly in your letters. Letters are different. Can think about what to say. Out here people want small talk, and I'm no good at it. They'd reached a wagon hitched to 2 massive horses. Garrett loaded her trunk in the back, then turned to help her up. His hands went to her waist. Through her dress, through the corset, she felt their heat, their size. They nearly spanned her entire torso. He lifted her onto the bench like she weighed nothing, like she was made of paper, and Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. She'd never been handled so easily, never felt so small. Garrett climbed up beside her. The wagon tilted under his weight. He took the reins and clicked his tongue, and the horses started forward. Eleanor gripped the edge of the bench. Her knuckles were white again. She made herself loosen her fingers, made herself breathe. You're afraid. Garrett didn't look at her, kept his eyes on the road ahead. I'm cautious, Eleanor said. There's a difference. Fair enough. A pause. Let me tell you how this works. When we get to the ranch, I'll show you your room. Guest bedroom. Good bed, east-facing window for morning light. There's a lock. And if I use it every night? Then you use it every night. Now he did look at her. I won't force myself on you, Eleanor. Not before we're married. Not after. That clear? Eleanor studied his profile, the hard line of his jaw, the set of his shoulders. You wrote that you were lonely, that you wanted a wife, a partner, but you seem perfectly capable of managing alone. His hands tightened on the reins. Capable's not the same as happy. I've spent 8 years building that ranch. Good stock, good land, enough money that bad winters don't scare me. But every night I sit in that house alone. Every morning I wake up alone. Got tired of it. Tired of talking to horses like they'd answer. So you wrote to the bride agency. They sent 6 responses. You were the only one who didn't ask about money first thing. What did I ask? If I had books, what kind I liked. The ghost of a smile touched his mouth. I've got maybe 20. Read 'em all so many times I can recite passages. Told you that and you sent me a list of your favorites. That's when I knew. Knew what? That you were lonely too. The words hung between them. Eleanor looked away out at the prairie rolling past. Empty, endless. She understood now why he'd written those letters. Out here a person could vanish and no one would know. No one would care. "I was a teacher," she said. "Girls' school in Boston. When it closed, I had nowhere to go. No family, no prospects." She made herself meet his eyes. "I answered 3 bride advertisements. You were the only one who wrote back. Then I guess we're both lucky." They rode in silence. The wagon bounced over ruts, and Eleanor grabbed the rail to steady herself. The sun climbed higher, turning the air thick as wet wool. She loosened her collar, then her cuffs, trying to find relief that didn't exist. Beside her, Garrett seemed unbothered, like the heat was just another thing to endure. "There," he said finally, pointing ahead. "Home." Eleanor followed his gesture. A house rose from the prairie dark wood stone foundation, 2 stories with a porch wrapped around the front. Larger than she'd expected, sturdier. Outbuildings scattered around it, barn corrals, chicken coop, what looked like a bunkhouse. This wasn't some rough homestead clinging to survival. This was established, permanent. "You built all this yourself?" "Most of it. Had help with the barn." Garrett guided the horses toward the house. "The house was my father's. He died 6 years back." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He was hard. Taught me to work, taught me to survive. But he wasn't warm." A pause. "Guess I take after him." He pulled the wagon to a stop, climbed down, reached up for her. Eleanor hesitated. Just a second. But Garrett saw it. Something flickered in his expression, hurt maybe, or resignation, like he was used to people hesitating. She put her hands on his shoulders. Let him lift her down. His hands at her waist again, that overwhelming strength. Her feet touched the ground, but he didn't release her immediately. They stood close enough that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes, could smell leather and sweat and something earthier. "I meant what I wrote," he said quietly. "Every word. I want a partner, Eleanor. Someone beside me, not behind me. I know I'm—" He paused, searching for words. "I know I scare people. But I swear I won't hurt you. Won't force you. You'll be safe here." Eleanor searched his face. Beneath the scars and stubble and sheer overwhelming size, she saw something vulnerable. Something that needed to be believed. "Show me the house," she said. Relief washed over him. He released her waist, grabbed her trunk, and carried it up the porch steps. The front door opened into a large room. Stone fireplace, simple furniture. And Eleanor's heart lifted, shelves of books lining one wall. "Kitchen's through there." Garrett gestured to a doorway. "Your room's upstairs. First door on the right. Mine's at the end. Washroom between them, pump inside so you don't freeze in winter." Eleanor followed him up the narrow staircase. His shoulders nearly brushed both walls. The floorboards creaked under his weight, a deep, settling sound that said this house knew him well. He pushed open a door. A clean bedroom. Quilt-covered bed dresser, small writing desk beneath the window. More than she'd hoped for. Garrett set her trunk down. "I'll let you settle. When you're ready, come down. I'll show you around." He turned to leave. "Garrett." He stopped in the doorway, looked back. "The lock," Eleanor said. "Show me." Understanding crossed his face. He walked to the door, pulled it shut, and twisted the simple bolt. Click. Solid. Real. Then he opened it again. "Your turn," he said quietly. Eleanor stepped forward, closed the door with him on the other side, turned the lock. Click. "Good." His voice came through the wood. "Good." She could barely hear herself. His footsteps moved down the hall. Heavy, steady. A door opened and closed at the far end. Eleanor waited, counted to 30, then unlocked her door. The hallway was empty. She walked to the window and looked out at the ranch, the barn, the corrals, the prairie stretching beyond. This was her life now. This house. This land. That massive scarred man who'd promised to protect her. She pulled out his letters, spread them across the quilt, read them in the light of her new room. They sounded different now. She could hear his deep voice in every line, could picture those scarred hands forming the words. He'd told her he wasn't refined, wasn't easy, but he'd also told her he was loyal, capable of tenderness, even if he didn't show it often. The question was, could she believe him a week? She had a week before the preacher came, before she'd have to stand in front of witnesses and bind herself to this life forever. Eleanor stood, smoothed her dress, went to find out who Garrett Stone really was beneath all that muscle and silence. Because if his letters were true, if the man who'd written about loneliness and hope was real, then maybe she'd found something worth keeping. She found him in the barn. He'd stripped off his shirt. His back was to her muscles shifting under sweat-slicked skin as he forked hay into a stall. Scars crisscrossed his shoulders. Old ones, white and faded, the kind that came from hard work and harder lessons. Eleanor's throat went dry. He must have heard her because he turned, froze, then grabbed his shirt and pulled it on in one quick motion. "Sorry," he muttered. "Didn't know you'd come down. It's your home, your barn." Eleanor forced herself to step inside. The air smelled of hay and horses and leather oil. "You said you'd show me around." "Yeah, right." He ran a hand through his hair, leaving it more disheveled than before. "This is the barn. 20 stalls. Got 15 horses, 5 are yours to learn on. They're gentle. Mine wrote that you'd never ridden. Can't live out here without riding." He moved to the nearest stall. A gray mare poked her head out, and Garrett's entire demeanor softened. "This is Silver. She's patient. Won't throw you." Eleanor approached slowly. The mare snuffled her palm, looking for treats. "She's beautiful. She's yours." "Garrett." "I can't." "You can." He looked at her over the horse's neck. "Out here you need your own horse. Something that'll carry you to town or to the neighbors or away from danger. Silver's trained, steady. She'll take care of you." Away from danger. Or away from him, if Eleanor needed to run. The thought must have shown on her face because Garrett's expression shuddered. "I'll teach you to ride tomorrow, if you want." "I want," Eleanor said quickly. "I do. This is all so much. Too much. Different." She met his eyes. "Everything's different out here." "Yeah." He set the pitchfork aside. "Come on, I'll show you the rest." They walked through the barn, past horses that whickered at Garrett's approach, past tack rooms and feed storage. He explained everything in short clipped sentences, what needed doing, when, why. This was his world, Eleanor realized. These animals, this land, this endless cycle of work and survival. Outside, the sun was dropping toward the horizon, painting the sky gold and pink. Garrett showed her the chicken coop, the smokehouse, the well. He moved with efficiency, wasting no motion, and Eleanor found herself watching the way he handled things. Carefully, gently, even when he didn't need to be. "You hungry?" he asked finally. Eleanor realized she was starving. She'd been too nervous to eat on the train. "Yes." "Come on, I'll make dinner." She followed him back to the house. The kitchen was clean and surprisingly well organized. Garrett moved through it like he knew exactly where everything was, pulling out pots and food with practiced ease. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the table. "This'll take a few minutes." "I can help. You just traveled 3 days. Sit." Eleanor sat, watched him work. He moved efficiently, chopping vegetables with quick, precise strikes, stirring a pot of something that smelled incredible. This was habit, she realized. Years of cooking for himself, eating alone. "What happened to your father?" she asked. Garrett's knife paused. Just for a second. "Pneumonia. Took him fast." "You were alone after that. Had ranch hands for a while. Most moved on." He scraped chopped onions into the pot. "Turns out I'm not easy to work for." "Because you're not friendly." Because I expect things done right, done my way. He glanced at her. That gonna be a problem? Eleanor considered this. Depends. Do you expect me to do things your way? In the barn with the stock? Yeah, that's safety. But in the house? He shrugged. This is your home now. You can run it however you want. Just like that. Just like that. He ladled stew into 2 bowls, set one in front of her with a chunk of bread. I'm good at ranching, Eleanor. I'm not good at this. He gestured vaguely between them. People, talking, making someone comfortable. But I meant what I wrote. I want a partner. You'll have say in things here. Eleanor picked up her spoon, tasted the stew. Her eyes widened. This is good. Yeah. He looked pleased. Actually pleased, like her approval mattered. Very good. They ate in silence. Eleanor finished every drop, surprised by her own hunger. When she looked up, Garrett was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What? She asked. Nothing. Just good to have someone at this table. He stood, collected the bowls. You should rest. Tomorrow's soon enough to start learning everything. Eleanor nodded. She was exhausted, she realized. 3 days of travel catching up with her all at once. Garrett. Yeah. Thank you. For dinner, for showing me around. She gestured at the house. For this. Something in his expression softened. Thank you for coming. For trusting me enough to get on that train. He paused at the sink. I know I'm not what you expected, but I'm hoping I can be what you need. Then he turned back to the dishes, dismissing her gently. Eleanor climbed the stairs to her room, locked the door, changed into her nightgown, and slipped between the quilts. Through the walls, she could hear Garrett moving around downstairs, water running, his heavy footsteps. Then later his door closing at the end of the hall. She lay in the darkness, listening to the prairie wind, and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. A giant who cooked dinner and gave her horses. A man who promised protection but offered her locks. Someone who wrote poetry but couldn't make small talk. Eleanor pulled his letters from under her pillow, read them one more time by moonlight. Every word true he'd said. She hoped he was right, because in 7 days there'd be no going back. Eleanor woke to the sound of roosters and something else, a rhythmic thudding that shook the floorboards. She sat up disoriented, her heart hammering. The room was still dim, barely touched by dawn light. The thudding came again. Footsteps. Garrett's footsteps moving downstairs. She'd slept in a strange man's house. Actually slept, which surprised her. She'd expected to lie awake all night jumping at every sound, but exhaustion had pulled her under like a riptide. Eleanor dressed quickly, fumbling with buttons in the half-dark. Her traveling dress was wrinkled, but it would have to do. She unlocked her door, that simple click already feeling less frightening, and made her way downstairs. The kitchen was empty, but coffee sat on the stove still hot. A plate of biscuits beside it covered with a cloth. A note in rough handwriting. Help yourself. I'm in the barn. Eleanor poured coffee, burned her tongue on the first sip, and took a biscuit outside. The morning air was cool, not yet touched by the brutal heat she'd felt yesterday. The sky was turning pink at the edges, and somewhere a bird was singing. It was beautiful in a way Boston had never been, raw and open and alive. She found Garrett in the barn mucking out stalls. He'd already worked through half of them, hay piled high, fresh bedding spread. Sweat darkened his shirt between his shoulder blades. Morning, she said. He straightened, pitchfork in hand. You're up early. So are you. Stock doesn't care what time it is. They need tending. He studied her for a moment. Sleep okay? Better than I expected. Something like relief crossed his face. Good, that's good. He stabbed the pitchfork into a hay bale. You ready to learn? Learn what? Everything. Can't live out here if you don't know how things work. He gestured around the barn. Horses need feeding twice a day. Chickens need feeding and their eggs collected. Garden needs watering. Cows need milking. It's a lot, but you'll get used to it. Eleanor's stomach dropped. I don't know how to do any of that. I know. That's why I'm teaching you. He walked to Silver's stall. Come here. Eleanor set down her coffee and approached. The gray mare nickered softly. This is a halter, Garrett said, showing her the leather straps. Goes on like this, see over the nose behind the ears, not too tight. His hands moved with practiced ease. You try. He took the halter off and handed it to Eleanor. She stared at it at the buckles and straps that seemed impossibly complicated. I don't. You do. Just go slow. Eleanor reached for Silver's head. The mare shifted and Eleanor jerked back. She won't hurt you, Garrett said. His voice was patient. She's just curious. Try again. Eleanor tried again. Fumbled the halter. Dropped it. Tried a third time and somehow got it twisted backwards. Here. Garrett moved behind her, his presence suddenly overwhelming. He reached around her, his arms bracketing hers, and guided her hands. Nose first. See, then up and over. Now buckle it. His chest pressed against her back. She could feel his heartbeat steady and slow. Could feel the heat radiating off him like a forge. Her hands shook as she tried to work the buckle. Breathe, he said quietly. Just breathe and focus. Eleanor breathed. Focused. Got the buckle fastened. There, Garrett said. Good. But he didn't step back immediately. Stayed there, surrounding her, until Eleanor's heart was racing for entirely different reasons. Then he moved away, and the cool air rushed back. Now lead her out, he said, like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just made Eleanor's entire body forget how to function properly. She led Silver out of the stall, the mare following docilely. Into the morning light, where Garrett had brushes and combs laid out. Grooming comes before riding, always. Lets you check for injuries, keeps them healthy, builds trust. He picked up a curry comb. Watch first. He moved around Silver with smooth efficiency, showing Eleanor how to brush, where to check for problems, how to pick out hooves. His hands were gentle despite their size, and Silver leaned into his touch like she trusted him completely. Your turn, he said, handing Eleanor the brush. She tried to copy his movements. Silver tolerated her amateur attempts with patience that seemed almost human. Good, Garrett said. You're doing good. They spent the next hour on grooming. Then Garrett showed her how to saddle a horse, the blanket first, then the saddle, checking the girth. Eleanor's arms ached from lifting the heavy saddle, but she managed. Now you get on, Garrett said. Eleanor stared at Silver's back. It seemed impossibly high. How? Foot in the stirrup, pull yourself up. He demonstrated on another horse, making it look effortless. Try it. Eleanor put her foot in the stirrup, tried to pull herself up, couldn't, tried again, failed again. I can't. You can. Garrett dismounted, came to stand beside her. You're strong enough. You're just scared. I'm not scared. He raised an eyebrow. You're gripping that saddle like it's going to save your life. That's scared. His voice softened. I won't let you fall, Eleanor. I'm right here. She looked at him, at the certainty in his eyes, at those massive hands ready to catch her. She tried again, got her foot up, pulled hard, and suddenly she was rising, partly her own strength, partly Garrett's hand on her back, steadying her. Then she was in the saddle higher than she'd ever been, and the world looked different from up here. See? Garrett's hand lingered on her knee for a second. Told you. Eleanor's legs trembled. Now what? Now you sit there and get used to it. Tomorrow we'll walk. Day after maybe trot. He smiled up at her. Actually smiled, and it transformed his entire face. You're doing real good, Eleanor. Something warm bloomed in her chest. Pride, maybe. Or relief that she hadn't completely embarrassed herself. They spent another hour with Eleanor just sitting in the saddle, getting used to the feel of the horse beneath her, learning how to hold the reins. Garrett stood nearby the whole time, close enough to catch her if she fell far enough to give her space to learn. Finally, he helped her down. Eleanor's legs nearly buckled when she hit the ground. "Sore?" Garrett asked. "Very. It gets easier. Come on, I'll show you the chickens." The chicken coop was behind the house, a sturdy structure with 24 hens pecking in the yard. Garrett opened the gate, and they flooded toward him like he was their personal savior. "They're friendlier than they look," he said. "Eggs are in the nesting boxes. Reach in slow, they don't like fast movements." Eleanor reached into the first box. A hen squawked indignantly and pecked her hand. "Ow! She's protective. Try the next one." The next hen let Eleanor take 2 eggs without protest. By the time she'd collected a basketful, she'd been pecked 3 more times and had feathers stuck to her dress. Garrett watched with barely concealed amusement. "You'll toughen up. Is everything out here trying to hurt me?" "Nah, most things will leave you alone if you leave them alone." He took the basket. "Except the chickens. They're just mean." Eleanor found herself laughing. Actually laughing, and Garrett's eyes crinkled at the corners. "There," he said. "That's better. You've been wound tight as a spring since you got here." "Can you blame me?" "No." His expression sobered. "No, I can't." They walked back to the house together. Eleanor's entire body ached muscles she didn't know she had screaming in protest. But beneath the pain was something else. Accomplishment. She'd gotten on a horse. She'd collected eggs. She hadn't run screaming back to the train station. "Hungry?" Garrett asked. "Starving." He made breakfast eggs and bacon and more biscuits. They ate at the kitchen table, and Eleanor noticed how he'd positioned himself across from her rather than beside her, giving her space. Always giving her space. "What did you do in Boston?" he asked. "Before teaching, I mean." "I grew up there. My father was a clerk, my mother took in sewing. They both died of consumption when I was 19. Eleanor pushed eggs around her plate. "I had some education, so I got work at the girls' school. Taught literature and composition." "You miss it." "I miss having a purpose. Feeling useful." She looked up at him. "What about you? You said your father taught you ranching." "Yeah. Soon as I could walk, he had me working. By 10, I could rope and ride better than most grown men. By 15, I was running half the ranch myself." His jaw tightened. "He wasn't a kind teacher. Mistakes got punished. Hard." "The scars on your back." Garrett's fork stilled. "You saw those in the barn. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "No, it's fine. You'll see him again living here." He set down his fork. "Yeah, those are from him. Belt mostly. Sometimes a switch. He believed in discipline." Eleanor's chest ached. "That's not discipline. That's cruelty." "Maybe. But it made me strong. Made me capable." He met her eyes. "I won't ever raise a hand to you, Eleanor. Or to any children we might have. That stops with me." The words hung between them. Children. The reality of what marriage to him would mean crashed over Eleanor like cold water. She'd been so focused on surviving the journey, on learning to live here, that she hadn't let herself think about the rest of it. About sharing his bed, about bearing his children, about becoming his wife in every sense. Garrett must have seen something in her face because he stood abruptly. "I've got work to do. Fences need checking. You should rest." "Can I come with you?" He blinked. "Why?" "Because I want to learn. You said I needed to know how things work out here." "Fence work's hard. Boring." "I don't care." He studied her for a long moment. "All right. But wear different shoes. Those won't hold up." Eleanor changed into the most practical boots she owned, still not practical enough for ranch work, but better than nothing. When she came back down, Garrett had a horse saddled for himself and Silver ready for her. "We're riding. Fence line's 2 miles out. Can't walk it." He helped her mount his hands on her waist again, lifting her like she weighed nothing. Then he swung onto his own horse with fluid grace. They rode out together, Eleanor clinging to the saddle and trying to remember everything he'd taught her that morning. Garrett kept his horse to a slow walk, watching her from the corner of his eye. "Relax your shoulders," he called. "You're too stiff." "I'm trying not to fall off." "Silver won't let you fall. Trust her." Eleanor tried to relax, tried to trust. Slowly, incrementally, her body started to adjust to the rhythm of the horse's movement. The prairie stretched around them, endless and golden in the midday sun. Eleanor had never seen so much space, so much sky. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. They reached the fence line, wooden posts and wire stretching as far as Eleanor could see. Garrett dismounted and started walking along it, checking each post, testing the tension of the wire. "What are you looking for?" Eleanor asked from Silver's back. "Damage, breaks, places where cattle might have pushed through." He knelt by a post. "Here, see, this wire's loose. Needs tightening." He pulled tools from his saddlebag and got to work. Eleanor watched, fascinated despite herself. His hands moved with practiced precision, stretching wire, hammering staples, testing his work. This was what he did, she realized. Every day, all day. Endless maintenance and labor keeping this place running. "How much fence do you have?" she asked. "Miles of it. Takes weeks to check it all." He moved to the next post. "Why?" "It seems lonely. All this work, no one to talk to." "That's why I wrote those letters." He didn't look at her. Got tired of the quiet. Eleanor dismounted ungracefully, nearly falling, catching herself at the last second. She walked to where Garrett was working. "Teach me," she said. He looked up, surprised. "Teach you fence work." "Why not?" "Because it's—" He stopped himself, handed her the wire cutters. "All right. See, this wire needs to be tight enough that cattle can't push through, loose enough that it won't snap in cold weather. Feel it." Eleanor touched the wire. It thrummed under her fingers like a guitar string. "Too loose," Garrett said. "Needs tightening. Here's how." He showed her the process, stretching the wire, securing it, testing the tension. His hands covered hers, guiding her movements, and Eleanor tried to focus on the lesson instead of the heat of him beside her. "Like that?" she asked. "Exactly like that." He stepped back. "Try the next one yourself." Eleanor tried, fumbled. The wire slipped and snapped back, missing her face by inches. Garrett's hand shot out, catching her arm and pulling her back. "Careful. That could have cut you bad." His grip was firm but not painful. Eleanor's heart hammered from the close call, or from his touch, she couldn't tell. "Sorry," she whispered. "Don't be sorry. Just be careful." He released her. Maybe fence work's not the best place to start. But Eleanor was already reaching for the wire again. "Show me again. I want to learn." Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or approval. He showed her again, slower this time, making sure she understood before letting her try. They worked together for an hour, moving down the fence line. Eleanor's hands cramped and her back ached, but she kept going, kept learning, and Garrett kept teaching, his patience apparently endless. "You're stubborn," he said finally. "Is that a problem?" "No." He almost smiled. "I like stubborn." They rode back as the sun started its descent toward the horizon. Eleanor's entire body screamed with exhaustion, but beneath it was that same feeling of accomplishment. She'd learned something today. Proven something, maybe to Garrett or to herself, she wasn't sure. Dinner was quiet. Garrett made stew again, apparently his specialty, and they ate while the last light faded from the windows. "Tomorrow we'll work on milking," Garrett said. "You'll need to know that too." "All right. And I'll take you into town. Day after, maybe. Get you proper work clothes, boots that'll last. Anything else you need?" Eleanor set down her spoon. "Garrett, I don't have money for—" "I do. You're my—" He paused. "You're going to be my wife. What's mine is yours. That includes money for clothes." I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden." His voice was firm. "You're learning everything I throw at you, working harder than I expected. That's not a burden. That's partnership." Eleanor's throat tightened. Partnership. He kept using that word like he meant it. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't thank me, just—" He ran a hand through his hair. "Just don't give up on this. On us. I know I'm not easy. Know this life's not what you dreamed of. But I'm trying, Eleanor. I swear I'm trying." "I know you are." She met his eyes across the table. "I'm trying too." They held each other's gaze for a long moment. Then Garrett stood, collected the dishes, and turned to the sink. Eleanor climbed the stairs to her room. Locked the door out of habit more than fear. Changed into her nightgown and crawled into bed. Through the walls, she heard Garrett moving around. His door closing. The house settling into silence. She lay in the darkness, thinking about his hands guiding hers on the wire. About his patience teaching her to ride. About the way he'd caught her arm when the wire snapped his reflexes fast enough to save her from injury. He was trying. Really trying. And despite everything, despite his size and his scars and his rough edges, Eleanor found herself trying too. Trying to trust. Trying to believe that maybe, just maybe, his letters had been true. That maybe she could find happiness here. The next 3 days followed the same pattern. Garrett taught her everything: how to milk cows, how to curry horses properly, how to mend tack and chop wood and kill chickens for dinner. Eleanor's hands blistered and bled. Her muscles screamed. But she learned. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the fear started to fade. She still locked her door at night. But during the day, she found herself relaxing around Garrett. Found herself laughing at his dry observations, asking questions about the ranch, sitting beside him on the porch in the evenings while he whittled and she read. He never touched her unless teaching required it. Never crowded her space. Never made her feel like she owed him anything. On the 4th day, he took her to town. Crimson Ridge was small, one main street, maybe a dozen buildings. The general store, a saloon, a boarding house, a church. People stared as Garrett helped Eleanor down from the wagon, their eyes curious and judgmental in equal measure. "Ignore them," Garrett muttered, guiding her toward the store with a hand at the small of her back. Inside, a thin woman with gray hair looked up from behind the counter. Her eyes widened when she saw Garrett. "Mr. Stone, wasn't expecting you." "Mrs. Chen, this is Eleanor Grace, my fiancée. She needs work clothes." Mrs. Chen's gaze swept over Eleanor, assessing. "Mail-order bride." "Yes," Eleanor said, lifting her chin. "Let them judge." She'd survived Boston's boarding houses and judgmental schoolmarms. She could survive frontier gossip. "Well," Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. "Come on then. Let's see what we can do." She measured Eleanor, pulled clothes from shelves, made suggestions. Garrett stood near the door, arms crossed, watching everyone who came in like he expected trouble. "Your man's protective," Mrs. Chen said quietly. "He's not my man yet," Eleanor said. "Not until the preacher comes." "But you'll marry him." Eleanor thought about the last 4 days. About Garrett's patience, and his rough kindness, and the way he looked at her like she was something precious he was afraid of breaking. "Yes," she said. "I'll marry him." Mrs. Chen nodded. "Good. He needs someone. Been alone too long, that one." They left with packages of clothes, sturdy dresses, practical boots, a hat to keep the sun off. Garrett loaded everything into the wagon without comment, then helped Eleanor up. "Need anything else while we're here?" he asked. "No, thank you." He clicked his tongue and the horses started forward. They were almost out of town when a man stepped into the street in front of them. Garrett pulled the horses to a stop. His entire body went tense. "Stone," the man said. He was tall, weathered, with a face like old leather. "Heard you got yourself a mail-order bride." "Tom." Garrett's voice was flat. "Move." Just being friendly. Wanted to meet the lady who's brave enough to marry the giant. Tom's eyes found Eleanor. Ma'am, you know what you're getting into? That's enough, Garrett said. Because Stone here's got a temper. Ask his father. Oh, wait, you can't. Man's dead. Garrett's hands tightened on the reins. Eleanor saw his knuckles go white, saw the muscle jump in his jaw. She put her hand over his. Let's go home, she said quietly. For a second, she thought Garrett wouldn't listen, thought he'd jump down from that wagon and do something they'd both regret. But then he took a breath, released it slowly. Yeah, he said. Home. He guided the horses around Tom, who laughed as they passed. They rode in silence for a mile. 2. Finally, Eleanor said, Who was that? Tom Bradley. Used to work for my father. Got fired for stealing. Garrett's jaw was still tight. He's been spreading rumors about me for years. What kind of rumors? That I killed my father. That I'm violent, dangerous. That any woman who marries me is signing her death warrant. He glanced at her. That why you're asking? No, I'm asking because I want to know the truth. The truth is my father died of pneumonia. I was with him. Held his hand while he drowned in his own lungs. It was... He stopped. Swallowed hard. It was bad. Real bad. But I didn't kill him. Eleanor studied his profile. The hard set of his shoulders, the pain in his eyes. I believe you. He looked at her surprised. Just like that. Just like that. She squeezed his hand, still covering his on the reins. I've been living with you for 4 days, Garrett. If you were violent, I'd know by now. Something in his expression cracked. Thank you, he said hoarsely. You don't know what that means. They rode the rest of the way home in silence, but Eleanor didn't move her hand, and Garrett didn't pull away. That night, Eleanor didn't lock her door. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Garrett move around his room. She'd made a decision somewhere between town and home, between Tom Bradley's accusations and Garrett's pain. She was going to marry him. Really marry him, not just go through the motions. She was going to trust him. The question was, would he trust her back? The preacher arrived on the 6th day, riding a dusty mare and carrying a worn Bible. Eleanor watched from the kitchen window as Garrett walked out to meet him. The two men shaking hands before heading toward the barn. She pressed her palms against the counter, trying to steady her breathing. Tomorrow. She'd marry Garrett Stone tomorrow. Her wedding dress hung on the back of her door, a simple blue cotton she'd made over the last 2 days. Nothing fancy, nothing like the ivory silk she'd dreamed of as a girl. But it was clean and practical, and it would have to do. Eleanor's hands shook as she started preparing dinner. The preacher would eat with them tonight, would stay in the bunkhouse, would perform the ceremony in the morning. Then it would be done. Legal, binding, forever. She dropped a potato. It rolled across the floor and she chased it, her vision blurring. You all right? Eleanor spun. Garrett stood in the doorway, the preacher behind him. She hadn't heard them come in. Fine, she said, clutching the potato. Just clumsy. Garrett's eyes narrowed, but he didn't push. Eleanor, this is Preacher Williams. Preacher Eleanor Grace. The preacher was older than Eleanor expected, maybe 60, with kind eyes and weathered hands. He removed his hat. Miss Grace, pleasure to meet you. And you. Eleanor set down the potato, wiped her palms on her apron. Dinner will be ready soon. Please sit. They ate at the kitchen table, venison stew and bread, simple but filling. The preacher talked about his circuit, about the families he'd visited, about a wedding he'd performed 2 weeks ago in a town 30 miles south. Garrett listened quietly, occasionally nodding, but his attention kept drifting to Eleanor. She could feel his eyes on her, could feel the weight of unasked questions. So, Preacher Williams said, setting down his fork, you two met through correspondence. Yes, Eleanor said. 8 months of letters. And you're certain about this marriage, both of you? I am, Garrett said immediately. The preacher looked at Eleanor. Miss Grace. Eleanor met Garrett's eyes across the table, remembered his patience teaching her to ride, his gentleness with the horses, the way he'd held himself back when Tom Bradley provoked him, the way he'd never once made her feel like she owed him anything. I'm certain, she said. Something in Garrett's expression softened. Relief, maybe. Or hope. After dinner, the preacher excused himself to the bunkhouse. Eleanor started washing dishes, her hands moving automatically while her mind raced. Garrett dried beside her in silence. When the last dish was done, he hung up the towel and turned to face her. Eleanor. Yes. You don't have to do this. His voice was low. I meant what I said on the platform. If you want to leave, I'll buy you a ticket. No questions. Do you want me to leave? No. The word came out harsh. He softened his tone. No, I don't. But I want you to want to stay. Not stay because you got no other choice. Eleanor dried her hands slowly. I had other choices, Garrett. I could have stayed in Boston, found work, scraped by. I chose to come here, chose to answer your letter, and now I'm choosing to marry you. Why? The question hung between them. Why would an educated Boston schoolteacher marry a rough rancher who scared most people just by existing? Why would she bind herself to this hard life, this isolated ranch, this man who was more comfortable with horses than humans? Eleanor stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes, to smell leather and hay, and something uniquely him. Because you kept your word, she said quietly. Every promise you made in those letters you kept. The separate room, the lock. Teaching me to survive out here. Treating me like a partner instead of property. She paused. And because when that man insulted you in town, you could have hurt him. Could have used all that strength to make him regret every word. But you didn't. You chose restraint. That tells me more about who you are than anything else could. Garrett's throat worked. I'm not good with words, Eleanor. Not like in the letters. Writing's different. I got time to think, to say things right. But face to face, He gestured helplessly. This. Rough and awkward and not much to look at. You're wrong about that last part. His eyes snapped to hers. What? Eleanor's cheeks heated, but she didn't look away. You're not hard to look at, Garrett. You're intimidating, yes, but not unpleasant. He stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. Eleanor. I should get to bed. Big day tomorrow. She moved past him, her heart hammering. At the stairs, she paused. Good night, Garrett. Good night, he said roughly. Eleanor climbed the stairs on trembling legs. Inside her room, she leaned against the door and pressed her hands to her burning cheeks. Had she really just told him he was attractive? What had possessed her? The truth, a small voice whispered. You told him the truth, because it was true. Somewhere between the train platform and tonight, somewhere between fear and trust, Eleanor had stopped seeing just the giant and started seeing the man. The way his eyes crinkled when he almost smiled. The gentleness of his hands despite their size. The quiet loneliness that clung to him like shadow. She changed into her nightgown and climbed into bed, knowing sleep wouldn't come easy. Tomorrow she'd stand in front of Preacher Williams and bind herself to Garrett Stone. Tomorrow night, there'd be no locked door between them. Tomorrow night, she'd learn what it meant to be a wife in every sense of the word. Eleanor pulled the quilts to her chin and tried not to think about it. Tried not to imagine those massive hands on her skin, that powerful body above hers, the unknown territory of intimacy she'd only read about in books. She was still awake when she heard Garrett's door close hours later. Still awake when the house fell silent. Still awake when the first light of dawn crept through her window. Her wedding day. Eleanor rose and washed in cold water from the basin, trying to calm her nerves. She braided her hair, pinned it up, pulled on the blue dress. It fit well, the waist snug, the skirts falling in clean lines. She looked at herself in the small mirror above the dresser and barely recognized the woman staring back. Sunburned cheeks, rougher hands, eyes that held something harder than they had a week ago. She looked like she belonged here. A knock at her door made her jump. "Eleanor," Garrett's voice. "You decent?" "Yes." The door opened. Garrett stood in the hallway wearing clean clothes, dark pants, a white shirt, his hair actually combed. He'd shaved too, revealing the strong line of his jaw. He looked almost civilized. Almost. His eyes swept over her, and something in his expression shifted. "You look beautiful." Eleanor's breath caught. "Thank you. You look different." "Clean, you mean?" A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "Figured I should make an effort. It's not every day a man gets married." "No, I suppose not." They stood there awkward as teenagers until Garrett cleared his throat. "Preacher's waiting downstairs. You ready?" "As I'll ever be." He offered his arm. Eleanor took it and they descended the stairs together. Preacher Williams waited in the main room, Bible in hand. He'd arranged the space, somehow moved furniture, opened windows, created something that almost resembled a chapel. Morning light streamed through the windows, painting everything gold. "Ah, there you are." The preacher smiled. "Shall we begin?" Eleanor's heart hammered. This was it. No going back after this. Garrett's hand covered hers on his arm. Warm. Steady. "I got you," he murmured. "It's okay to be scared." "I'm not scared," Eleanor lied. Liar. But his voice was gentle. They stood before the preacher. Garrett's hand found hers, engulfing it completely. His palm was rough with calluses, his grip firm but not painful. Preacher Williams opened his Bible. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The words washed over Eleanor. She heard them distantly, like they were meant for someone else. But then Garrett was speaking, his deep voice steady as stone. "I, Garrett Stone, take you, Eleanor Grace, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." His eyes never left hers. Every word felt like a promise, a vow carved into something permanent. "Eleanor," the preacher prompted. Eleanor swallowed hard. "I, Eleanor Grace, take you, Garrett Stone, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." Her voice shook, but she got through it. Got through the words that bound her to this man, this life, this future. "The ring?" Preacher Williams asked. Garrett reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "It was my mother's," he said quietly, slipping it onto Eleanor's finger. "She died when I was young, but my father kept it. Now it's yours." Eleanor stared at the ring. It fit perfectly, the gold warm against her skin. "Garrett, I don't have—" "Don't need one." He squeezed her hand. "This is enough. By the power vested in me," the preacher said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Garrett, you may kiss your bride." Garrett went very still. His eyes searched Eleanor's face, asking permission even now. Eleanor lifted her chin, closed the distance between them. Garrett bent down. He had to, she was so much smaller, and pressed his lips to hers. Gentle, almost reverent. Nothing like the rough kiss she'd expected from a man his size. It lasted only seconds, but when he pulled back, Eleanor's heart was racing. "Mrs. Stone," he said softly. "Mr. Stone," she whispered back. The preacher closed his Bible. "Congratulations. May God bless your union." They had breakfast together, the three of them, and then Preacher Williams prepared to leave. Garrett walked him out, shook his hand, paid him from a worn leather purse. Eleanor watched from the porch, the strange new ring on her finger catching the morning light. She was married. Actually, married. To the giant standing by the barn, watching the preacher ride away. To the man who'd promised her safety and kept his word. To the stranger who was now her husband. Garrett walked back slowly, his eyes on her. "So," he said when he reached the porch, "guess we're married now." "Guess so." Silence stretched between them, awkward and heavy with unspoken questions. "I got work," Garrett said finally. "Fences won't check themselves. You need anything?" "No, I'm fine." He nodded, started to turn away, stopped. "Eleanor." "Yes." "Tonight." He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the careful combing. "We don't have to. I mean, if you're not ready—" "Garrett." Eleanor cut him off, her cheeks burning. "We're married. I understand what that means." "I know you understand. I'm asking if you're ready." Eleanor thought about the locked door she'd stopped using 3 nights ago. About the trust she'd already given him in 100 small ways. About how marriage meant more than separate rooms and careful distance. "I'm ready," she said. "Are you?" His eyes darkened. "Yeah, I'm ready." They stared at each other across the porch, the weight of the evening ahead settling over them like a blanket. "Okay then," Eleanor said. "Okay." Garrett left for the fences. Eleanor went inside and tried to busy herself with normal tasks, dishes, laundry, preparing dinner. But her hands shook, her mind racing ahead to tonight, to what would happen when the sun set, and they were alone in this house, as husband and wife. She'd read books, of course, knew the mechanics of intimacy in a clinical sense. But knowing and experiencing were different things entirely. And experiencing it with a man. Garrett's sighs, Eleanor pushed the thought away. He'd been gentle with everything else. Patient. Careful. He wouldn't hurt her. Would he? The day crawled by. Eleanor cooked dinner, roast chicken and vegetables, putting more care into it than necessary. When Garrett returned dusty and tired, she had everything ready. They ate in near silence, the air thick with tension. Garrett kept glancing at her, his expression unreadable. Eleanor pushed food around her plate, her appetite gone. "You need to eat," Garrett said quietly. "I'm not hungry." "You're nervous." "Wouldn't you be?" He set down his fork. "Eleanor, look at me." She did. His eyes were serious but kind. "I meant what I said this morning. We don't have to do anything you're not ready for. Marriage license don't change that." "But you want to." It wasn't a question. "Yeah, I want to. Been thinking about it since you stepped off that train." His honesty was startling. "But I want you to want it too. Want you comfortable, not scared." Eleanor took a shaky breath. "I am scared. A little. You're—" She gestured helplessly. "You're very large, Garrett. And I've never—" "I know." His voice gentled. "I'll be careful. I swear I'll be careful." "How can you be sure? How can you know you won't hurt me?" Garrett pushed back from the table and walked to her side. Knelt down so they were eye level. Even kneeling, he was huge, but somehow the gesture made him seem less intimidating. "Give me your hand," he said. Eleanor held out her hand. Garrett took it in both of his, those massive hands engulfing hers completely. "See this," he said. "I could crush your hand right now. Wouldn't even take effort. But I'm not going to. Know why?" "Why?" "Because I got control. Spent my whole life learning control, how to gentle a spooked horse, how to handle newborn calves, how to hold something fragile without breaking it." He squeezed her hand gently, so gently. "You're not fragile, Eleanor. You're stronger than you think. But I'm still going to treat you like you're precious. Because you are. To me you are." Eleanor's eyes burned. "You really mean that?" "Every word." He released her hand and stood. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna finish dinner. Then we're gonna sit on the porch like we do every night. And when you're ready, when you feel ready, you tell me. If that's tonight, fine. If it's next week, that's fine too. I can wait, Eleanor. I've been waiting 8 years for someone like you. I can wait a little longer. Something in Eleanor's chest cracked open. This man, this rough, scarred, gentle man who'd promised her everything and delivered on every word. Tonight, she said. Garrett's eyes widened. You sure? I'm sure. Eleanor stood, her legs shaking but her voice steady. I don't want to wait, Garrett. I want... She paused, searching for words. I want to be your wife. Really, your wife. He crossed to her in 2 strides, cupped her face in his hands, so gentle, despite their size, and kissed her. Not like this morning's chaste press of lips, but deeper. Hungrier. A kiss that spoke of months of loneliness and hope and wanting. Eleanor gasped against his mouth. Garrett pulled back immediately. Too much, he asked, breathing hard. No, just surprising. She touched her lips, feeling them tingle. Do it again. He did. Kissed her slowly this time, letting her learn the shape of his mouth, the taste of him. Eleanor's hands found his chest, felt the solid muscle beneath his shirt, the rapid beating of his heart. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Upstairs, Garrett said roughly, before I lose what little control I got left. Eleanor took his hand and led him up the stairs. Her heart hammered, her palms sweating, but beneath the fear was something else. Anticipation, curiosity, trust. Inside his room, their room now. Garrett closed the door, turned to face her. Last chance to change your mind. I'm not changing my mind. Eleanor's fingers fumbled with the buttons of her dress. I don't know what I'm doing. Neither do I. At her startled look, he added, Never been with a woman before. Never wanted to. Not until you. Eleanor's hands stilled. Never. Was waiting for... He gestured at her. This. Someone who mattered. Something warm bloomed in Eleanor's chest. He'd waited. For her. For them. She finished unbuttoning her dress and let it pool at her feet. Stood before him in her chemise and petticoats, vulnerable and exposed. Garrett's eyes darkened. Beautiful, he breathed. You're so damn beautiful, Eleanor. He crossed to her slowly, giving her time to bolt if she wanted. But Eleanor didn't bolt. She stood her ground as he reached for her, as those massive hands settled on her waist and pulled her close. Tell me if I hurt you, he murmured against her hair. Tell me and I'll stop. I will. He kissed her again, his hands moving over her with careful reverence, learning the shape of her, the feel of her. Eleanor's head spun. She'd never been touched like this, like she was something sacred, something to be worshipped. Garrett lifted her so easily and carried her to the bed, laid her down gently, his body covering hers, and Eleanor felt the full weight and size of him. It should have been frightening. Instead, it felt safe, protected. Garrett, she whispered. I got you, he said. I got you, Eleanor. I promise. And he did. He kept every promise he'd made in his letters, in his vows, in the careful way he touched her. He was gentle when she needed gentleness, patient when she needed time, and when she finally gasped his name and pulled him closer, he was everything she'd hoped for, and nothing she'd feared. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the darkness. Eleanor's head rested on Garrett's chest, listening to his heart slow. His hand stroked her hair absently, the gesture tender. You okay? He asked quietly. Better than okay. Eleanor pressed a kiss to his chest. Thank you. For what? For being patient, for being careful, for being you. His arms tightened around her. Thank you for trusting me. For giving me a chance." He paused. "For coming all this way to marry a giant who don't know how to talk to people." Eleanor tilted her head to look at him. "You're talking to me just fine." "That's different. You're my wife." He said the word like it still surprised him. "My wife." "Say it again." "My wife." He smiled a real smile that transformed his entire face. "Mine." "Yours," Eleanor agreed, and realized she meant it. Somewhere between the train platform and this moment between fear and trust and everything in between, she'd become his. Not as property, but as a partner. As someone who'd chosen him and been chosen in return. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other. And for the first time since arriving in Montana, Eleanor didn't dream of Boston. She dreamed of prairie sunsets and endless sky and a future she was finally brave enough to reach for. When morning came, she woke to find Garrett already up, standing by the window and looking out at his land. Their land, she corrected herself. Their ranch. Their life. "Morning," she said. He turned, and his expression when he saw her warm and unguarded made her breath catch. "Morning, wife," he said. Eleanor smiled. "Morning, husband." He crossed to the bed, sat on the edge, and pulled her into his arms. "Got work to do today, but first..." He kissed her slowly, thoroughly, until Eleanor forgot about work and chores and everything except the feel of him. "Garrett?" she gasped when he finally pulled back. "The horses can wait." He kissed her again. Everything can wait. And for once, Eleanor didn't argue. She let herself be pulled back into his arms, into his warmth, into this new life she'd chosen. Because this was what partnership meant. Not just working side by side, but moments like this. Trust and tenderness, and the quiet certainty that they'd figure out the rest together. The giant cowboy who'd promised her a home had kept his word. And Eleanor Grace Stone, not just Eleanor anymore, but Eleanor Stone, had found something she'd stopped believing existed. She'd found home. Not in a place, but in a person. In the rough, gentle man who held her like she was precious and promised her tomorrow and every day after. And that Eleanor thought, as Garrett's lips found hers again, was worth every moment of fear it had taken to get here. The first week of marriage passed in a blur of work and discovery. Eleanor learned the rhythm of ranch life, the endless cycle of feeding and mending and tending that never stopped. Her hands grew rougher, her skin darker from the sun. She learned to read the sky for weather, to hear trouble in a horse's whinny, to know when Garrett needed silence and when he needed her voice. And at night, she learned him. The scars on his back that made him flinch if touched without warning. The way he held her afterwards, like she might disappear. The soft words he murmured in the darkness, words he'd never say in daylight. They were happy. As happy as two lonely people learning to be less lonely could be. Then the drought came. Eleanor noticed it first in the garden plants wilting despite her careful watering. Then the creek that ran through the east pasture started shrinking, the water level dropping inch by inch each day. Garrett spent longer hours checking water sources, his expression growing grimmer. "How bad is it?" Eleanor asked one evening as he came in covered in dust. "Bad enough." He washed his hands in the basin, scrubbing hard. "If we don't get rain soon, we'll lose cattle, maybe the whole herd. What can we do?" "Pray." He dried his hands roughly, and hoped the well holds out. But the well was dropping too. Eleanor could see it when she drew water each morning, the rope going deeper and deeper before hitting liquid. She started rationing without being asked, using wash water twice, letting dishes soak instead of rinsing. Garrett noticed. "You don't have to do that." "Yes, I do. We're partners, remember. That means when things are hard, we're hard together." Something in his expression softened. He pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. "Don't know what I did to deserve you." "You wrote good letters," Eleanor said against his chest. He laughed, actually laughed, and the sound eased some of the tension that had been building in the house. But the drought didn't care about laughter or love or any of it. The sun beat down day after day, merciless and hot. The grass turned brown, then brittle. Garrett moved the cattle to the north pasture where there was still some water, but it wouldn't last long. Eleanor watched him grow more tense, more silent. He worked from before dawn until after dark, trying to fix problems that couldn't be fixed with work alone. She brought him water and food in the fields, insisted he eat, even when he said he wasn't hungry. "You're gonna work yourself to death," she told him one afternoon. "Rather die working than watch everything I built die from doing nothing." "Garrett." "I'm fine, Eleanor." But his voice was sharp frustration bleeding through. "Just let me work." She left him alone after that. But worry gnawed at her. She'd seen this before in Boston, men pushed past their breaking points, turning brittle and mean when the world wouldn't bend to their will. Her father had been like that before the consumption took him, snapping at her mother over nothing, throwing things when the rent came due. Please, she prayed to whoever might be listening. Don't let Garrett become that. 3 weeks into the drought, one of the horses got sick. Silver the mare Garrett had given Eleanor. She wouldn't eat, wouldn't drink, just stood in her stall with her head down and her sides heaving. Eleanor found Garrett in the barn at midnight, sitting beside Silver's stall with his head in his hands. "Garrett!" He looked up. His eyes were red. "She's dying. I don't know what's wrong, but she's dying." Eleanor knelt beside him. "Have you tried?" "I've tried everything." His voice cracked. "Everything I know. It's not enough. Then we'll get the veterinarian from town. He's 2 days away, and I don't have money for his fee right now. Used everything I had buying feed for the cattle." Garrett's hands fisted in his hair. "I gave her to you. Promised she'd take care of you. And now I'm watching her die because I can't afford to save her." Eleanor had never heard such despair in his voice. She wrapped her arms around him, felt him shaking with exhaustion and grief and rage at his own helplessness. "It's not your fault," she whispered. "Whose fault is it then? I'm the one who's supposed to provide, supposed to take care of things. That's what a man does." He pulled away from her, stood up. "And I'm failing. At all of it." "You're not failing. Look around, Eleanor." His voice rose, echoing in the barn. The horses shifted nervously. "The drought's killing the grass. The well's running dry. That mare's dying. And I can't fix any of it. Can't make it rain, can't find water that ain't there. Can't save a horse when I don't know what's killing her." He turned to face her, and the anguish in his eyes made her chest ache. "What good am I if I can't even do that?" "Garrett Stone, you listen to me." Eleanor stood, planting herself in front of him. "You are not God. You can't control the weather or stop animals from getting sick. But you've done everything humanly possible to keep this ranch running. You work yourself to exhaustion every single day. You've moved cattle, rationed, water checked every fence line twice. That's not failing. That's fighting. Fighting's not enough if we still lose everything. Maybe not. But giving up definitely won't save anything." She grabbed his hands, forced him to look at her. "I didn't marry a quitter, Garrett. I married a fighter. So fight. And let me fight beside you." His jaw worked. For a moment, she thought he'd push her away. Retreat into that hard shell of self-sufficiency he'd worn for so many years. But then his shoulders dropped. "I'm scared," he said quietly. "Been scared since the drought started. Scared I'll lose the ranch, lose everything I built. Scared you'll realize you married a failure." "You're not a failure." Eleanor squeezed his hands. "You're human. And humans need help sometimes. So let me help." "How?" "I don't know yet, but 2 heads are better than 1. She glanced at Silver, still laboring in her stall. "Let me sit with her tonight. You go sleep." "Eleanor." "You haven't slept in 3 days. You're no good to anyone if you collapse." She pushed him toward the barn door. "Go. I'll wake you if anything changes." Garrett hesitated, then nodded. He squeezed her shoulder as he passed a brief touch that said more than words could. Eleanor settled beside Silver's stall with a lantern and a bucket of water. The mare's breathing was shallow, her eyes glassy. Eleanor talked to her softly nonsense mostly, but the sound seemed to calm the horse. She must have dozed off because she woke to birdsong and morning light streaming through the barn door. Silver was standing her head in the water bucket, drinking deeply. Eleanor scrambled up. "Garrett!" He came running, half-dressed, fear on his face. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Look." Silver lifted her head from the bucket and nickered softly. Her eyes were clear, her breathing steady. Whatever had been killing her had passed. Garrett sagged against the stall door. "Thank God. Thank God." "Maybe she just needed someone to sit with her," Eleanor said. "Sometimes that's all any of us need." He pulled her into his arms, held her so tight she could barely breathe. "You're amazing. You know that." "I sat in a barn. That's not amazing." "You sat with a dying horse all night when you could have been in bed. You believed she'd get better when I'd given up." He pulled back to look at her. "That's amazing, Eleanor." She touched his face, felt the stubble rough under her fingers. "We're a team. Remember, you do the impossible during the day. I'll do it at night." He kissed her, then hard and desperate and grateful all at once. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you," Garrett said. The words hung between them. He looked shocked he'd said them, like they'd escaped without permission. Eleanor's heart hammered. "You love me." "Yeah, I do." He ran a hand through his hair. "Probably loved you since you got off that train looking scared but determined. Definitely loved you since you put your hand over mine when Tom Bradley was running his mouth. But I know it's early and you probably don't—" "I love you too," Eleanor interrupted. Garrett froze. "What?" "I love you. You stubborn, overworked, gentle giant of a man." She smiled. "I love you." He kissed her again, softer this time, like she was something precious he was afraid of breaking. "Say it again." "I love you, Garrett Stone." "Damn," he whispered against her mouth. "Damn, that sounds good." They stood there in the barn, holding each other, while Silver munched hay contentedly, and the morning sun painted everything gold. It wasn't a solution to the drought, or the dying grass, or any of the 100 other problems facing them. But it was something. A reminder that they weren't alone in the fight. 2 days later, storm clouds appeared on the horizon. Garrett saw them first. He'd been checking the north fence when the wind shifted, bringing the smell of rain. He rode back to the house at a gallop, his face transformed. "Eleanor, Eleanor, come look!" She ran out to the porch, alarmed by his urgency. He pointed west, where dark clouds were building like a wall. "Storm's coming," he said. "Big one by the looks of it." They stood together and watched those clouds roll in, blotting out the sun, turning the air electric. The cattle sensed it too, lowing nervously in their pasture. The horses shifted in the barn. "Should we worry?" Eleanor asked. "About the rain, never. We need this." Garrett's hand found hers. "Though if there's lightning, we'll need to watch for fire." The first drops fell an hour later, big fat drops that exploded in the dust like little bombs. Then more. Then a deluge that turned the world gray and wet and loud. Garrett whooped, actually whooped with joy. He grabbed Eleanor and spun her around on the porch, both of them laughing like children. "It's raining," he said unnecessarily. "It's actually raining. I can see that. This'll save us. This'll save everything." Eleanor wanted to believe him, but something in the air felt wrong. Too much electricity, too much pressure. The wind was picking up, bending the trees, and the rain was coming sideways now, stinging where it hit exposed skin. "Garrett," she said, "maybe we should go inside." He looked up at the sky, and his smile faded. Yeah, you're right." They barely made it through the door before the storm hit in earnest. Wind screamed around the house, shaking the windows in their frames. Rain hammered the roof so loud they had to shout to hear each other. "Is it always like this?" Eleanor yelled. "Sometimes, but this one's—" Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the house. "Bad." They moved away from the windows. Garrett lit a lamp, even though it was only afternoon, the storm having turned day to night. Eleanor's hands shook as she helped him secure loose items, move things away from leaky spots in the roof. "The horses," she said suddenly. "They're fine. Barn's solid." "Are you sure?" Another crack of thunder, this one so close, Eleanor felt it in her chest. The lamp flickered. "I'm sure," Garrett said. But he looked toward the barn anyway, worry creasing his face. The storm raged for hours. Rain poured through a crack in the roof they hadn't known was there, forcing them to move their bedding downstairs. Wind tore shingles away. They could hear them clattering across the yard. Something heavy slammed into the side of the house, and Eleanor grabbed Garrett's arm. "What was that?" "Don't know. Can't check till the storm passes." But Eleanor could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched every time something crashed or broke. This rain they'd prayed for was destroying his ranch even as it saved it. Finally, near midnight, the storm began to ease. The wind died down. The rain softened to a steady drumming. Garrett grabbed his coat. "Where are you going?" Eleanor asked. "To check the barn. Make sure the horses are all right." "I'm coming with you." "Eleanor, I'm coming." They went out together into the wet darkness. The yard was a mess, branches everywhere, broken fence posts, debris scattered like a child's toys. But the barn was intact, and when they pushed open the door, all the horses nickered greetings. "Thank God," Garrett breathed. They checked each stall, making sure no one was injured. Silver pushed her nose into Eleanor's hand, looking for treats. Everything was fine. Better than fine. "We should check the fence lines," Garrett said. "Make sure nothing's broken." "In the dark, in this mud." "Cattle could get out. We'd lose them." Eleanor grabbed his arm. "Garrett, you can't see anything right now. You'll break your neck trying to ride in this. It can wait till morning." "But—" "Morning," Eleanor said firmly. "The cattle survive this long, they'll survive 6 more hours." He wanted to argue. She could see it in the set of his jaw, the restless energy that always drove him to action. But finally he nodded. "Morning," he agreed. But first light. They trudged back to the house, soaked through, despite their coats. Inside, Eleanor made Garrett strip off his wet clothes and wrapped him in blankets by the dying fire. She changed into dry things herself, then set water to heat for coffee. "You were right," Garrett said, watching her work. "About needing help, about not being able to do everything alone." He paused. "I'm not good at accepting that." "I noticed. My father raised me to be self-sufficient, to never depend on anyone, never show weakness. Asking for help meant you were weak." Eleanor poured coffee, brought him a cup. "Your father was wrong about a lot of things." "Yeah." Garrett wrapped his hands around the cup. "He was. But knowing that and undoing years of his teaching, that's harder. You don't have to undo it all at once. Just—" Eleanor sat beside him. "Just let me in when it gets hard. Let me be your partner, not just your wife." "You are my partner. From the day you stepped off that train, you've been my partner." He set down his coffee and pulled her close. "I'm just learning what that means. Learning to share the weight instead of carrying it all myself." "We'll learn together," Eleanor said. They sat by the fire until dawn, listening to the rain ease and finally stop. When the first light touched the windows, Garrett was already up, pulling on boots and heading for the door. Eleanor didn't try to stop him. This was who he was, a man who faced problems head-on, who couldn't rest until he knew the extent of the damage. She could love him and accept that even if it scared her sometimes. She made breakfast while he was gone, trying not to worry. When he finally returned an hour later, his face was grim. "How bad?" she asked. "North fence is down. Cattle scattered. 3 dead that I could see tree fell on them during the storm. He sat heavily at the table. And the creeks flooded. Took out the bridge into town. Eleanor's stomach dropped. How long till it's passable? Week, maybe 2. Depends on how fast the water recedes. So we're trapped here. Yeah. He scrubbed his face with his hands. And I've got cattle to round up before predators find them. Fence to rebuild. Damage to repair. All before winter comes. The weight of it all pressed down on Eleanor. The endless work, the isolation, the constant fight against nature and bad luck, and everything else the frontier threw at them. This was what she'd signed up for, not just the good parts, the gentle nights and morning kisses, but this too. The fear and exhaustion and wondering if they'd make it through. "Where do we start?" she asked. Garrett looked at her. You think I'm staying here while you round up cattle? Not a chance." Eleanor stood, started pulling on her work boots. "You taught me to ride, taught me to mend fences. Now teach me to round up cattle." "Eleanor, it's dangerous. Cattle can be mean, especially when they're spooked. You could get hurt." "So could you, but you're going anyway." She met his eyes. "I told you I'd fight beside you. I meant it. So either take me with you, or I'll follow on my own." A slow smile spread across his face. "You're the stubbornest woman I've ever met." "You married me. That's your own fault." He laughed and pulled her into his arms. "Yeah, best decision I ever made." They spent the next 3 days rounding up cattle. Eleanor learned quickly that cows were stupid, stubborn, and occasionally mean. She got kicked twice, knocked off Silver once, and came home each night so sore she could barely move. But she also learned that she was tougher than she'd thought, that she could push through fear and exhaustion and still get the job done. Garrett watched her with something like awe. "You're amazing," he said one evening as they collapsed on the porch, too tired to even make dinner. "I'm sweaty and bruised and I smell like cow," Eleanor said. "Yeah, amazing." He kissed her anyway, long and slow and deep. "My wife, the cattle wrangler. Don't get used to it. Soon as that bridge is fixed, I'm taking a proper bath in town." But there was pride in her voice. She'd done this. Helped save the herd, helped rebuild the fences, helped keep the ranch running when things got hard. She wasn't just Garrett's wife anymore. She was a rancher herself. By the end of the week, they'd recovered most of the cattle and repaired the worst of the damage. The ranch would survive. They would survive, battered and exhausted, but still standing. That night, lying in bed with Garrett's arms around her and the sound of crickets through the open window, Eleanor realized something. She was happy. Truly, deeply happy, in a way she'd never been in Boston. This life was hard, harder than anything she'd imagined, but it was real, honest, built on trust and work and love that had been tested and held strong. "You awake?" Garrett murmured. "Yeah. Been thinking. About hiring help, ranch hands. Can't keep doing all this ourselves, especially if..." He paused. "If we have kids someday. You'll need help then." Eleanor's hand went to her stomach instinctively. They'd been careful so far, but not that careful. "You want children?" "Yeah, don't you?" "I do. I'm just surprised you do. You seem so..." She searched for the word. "Self-contained. Like you don't need anyone." "Needed you, didn't I?" His arms tightened around her. "And yeah, I want kids. Want to fill this house with noise and chaos and everything my childhood wasn't. Want to be a better father than mine was." He kissed her temple. "Want to see you round and beautiful with my baby inside you." Eleanor's breath caught at the tenderness in his voice. "We should probably practice then. Making babies." She felt him smile against her hair. "Yeah, probably should." He rolled her beneath him, and Eleanor forgot about storms and cattle, and everything except the feel of him, the weight of him, the way he loved her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Later, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Garrett said quietly, "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up. On me, on this place, on us. It would have been easy to get back on that train. to decide I wasn't worth the trouble. "You're worth it," Eleanor said simply. "All of it. Every hard day, every storm, every scared moment. You're worth it, Garrett Stone." He didn't answer, just held her tighter like she might disappear if he let go. And Eleanor held him back, this giant of a man who'd promised her a home and given her so much more. Given her purpose and partnership and a love she'd stopped believing existed. The drought had broken, the storm had passed, and they'd survived it together just like they'd survive whatever came next, because that's what partners did. They stood side by side, faced the world together, and refused to let go, no matter how hard the wind blew. Autumn came to Montana with a vengeance, turning the world gold and crimson overnight. Eleanor stood on the porch, watching leaves tumble across the yard, one hand pressed to her stomach, where a secret was growing. She'd suspected for 2 weeks now, but this morning's sickness had confirmed it. She was carrying Garrett's child. The knowledge filled her with equal parts joy and terror. Joy because she wanted to give him the family he'd never had. Terror because childbirth on the frontier was dangerous, and the nearest doctor was still 2 days' ride away even with the bridge repaired. "You all right?" Eleanor turned to find Garrett watching her from the doorway, concern creasing his face. He'd become attuned to her moods over the months, reading her like one of his precious books. "I'm fine," she said. Then, because she'd promised never to lie to him, "Actually, I need to tell you something." His expression shifted to worry. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. At least I don't think it is." Eleanor took a breath. "I'm pregnant, Garrett." He froze. Completely froze, like someone had turned him to stone. For a terrifying second, Eleanor thought he was angry, disappointed, afraid. Then his face broke into a smile so wide it transformed him. "Pregnant," he breathed. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor." He crossed the porch in 2 strides and swept her into his arms, spinning her around like she weighed nothing. Eleanor laughed despite her nerves clutching his shoulders. "Garrett put me down before you make me sick again." He set her down immediately, his hands going to her stomach. Sorry, I just..." He shook his head. "A baby. We're having a baby." "We are." Eleanor covered his hands with hers. "Are you happy about it?" "Happy." He looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Eleanor, I'm..." He paused, searching for words. "I don't got words for what I am. Terrified, yeah. But also, whole. Like something I didn't know was missing, just clicked into place." He knelt suddenly, pressing his forehead to her still flat stomach. "Hey there, little one. I'm your pa. And I promise you right now, I'm gonna be better than mine was. Gonna love you fierce and never raise a hand to you and teach you everything good I know." Eleanor's eyes burned. She stroked his hair, this giant of a man kneeling before her like she held the whole world in her body. Maybe she did. "You're going to be a wonderful father," she whispered. He looked up at her and there were tears on his cheeks. Actual tears. "I'm scared, Eleanor. What if I mess this up? What if I hurt them without meaning to, or say the wrong thing, or..." "You won't. I know you won't." She pulled him to his feet. "You're the gentlest man I've ever known, Garrett Stone. That baby's lucky to have you." He kissed her, then soft and reverent like she was something sacred. When he pulled back, his hands trembled against her face. "We need to get you to a doctor. Make sure everything's okay. Eventually. But not yet. I'm only a few weeks along. Still, we should..." "Garrett." Eleanor caught his hands. "I'm fine. The baby's fine. Don't go all overprotective on me now." But it was too late. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor watched Garrett transform into a mother hen. He wouldn't let her lift anything heavy, insisted she rest, more hovered constantly, until Eleanor wanted to scream. "I'm pregnant, not dying," she told him one afternoon when he'd physically removed a basket of laundry from her hands. "I know that." "Do you?" "Because you're treating me like I'm made of glass." "You're carrying my child, Eleanor. Our child. I'm allowed to be careful." Careful is fine. Smothering is not. She grabbed the basket back. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, most of them while doing a lot more work than laundry. Garrett's jaw tightened. Most of them didn't matter to me. The words hung between them. Eleanor's frustration melted. She set down the basket and wrapped her arms around his waist. I know you're scared, she said against his chest. I'm scared too. But you have to let me live, Garrett. Let me work and move and be myself. Because if you wrap me in cotton wool for 7 more months, I'll go crazy. She felt him sigh. I can't lose you. Can't lose either of you. You won't. I'm strong. Stronger than you think. She pulled back to look at him. Trust me. Like I trusted you when I got off that train. His arms tightened around her. I do trust you. Just hard to watch you work and not want to do it all myself. I know, but you need to try. He did try, though Eleanor caught him watching her constantly ready to jump in if she so much as stumbled. It was annoying and endearing in equal measure. By October, her stomach had begun to swell. Just slightly, but enough that her dresses needed letting out. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table one evening sewing new seams when Garrett came in from the barn. Got something for you, he said. Eleanor looked up. He was holding something behind his back, looking almost shy. What is it? He brought his hands forward, revealing a carved wooden cradle. Simple but beautiful, the wood sanded smooth and joints fitted perfectly. Made it myself, he said. Been working on it in the barn after you go to sleep. Wanted to surprise you. Eleanor's throat closed. She set down her sewing and crossed to him, running her fingers over the cradle. He'd carved their initials into the headboard, GS and ES intertwined. And below them, a space for the baby's initials once they knew them. Garrett, it's beautiful. You think so? He looked uncertain. Never made a cradle before. Wasn't sure if I did it right. It's perfect. Eleanor kissed him. Everything's perfect. That night, as they lay in bed with Garrett's hand resting on her growing stomach, Eleanor felt the first flutter of movement, like a butterfly trapped inside her. Garrett, she whispered, give me your hand. She pressed his palm flat against her stomach. They waited in silence, and then it came again, that tiny flutter barely perceptible. Garrett's entire body went rigid. Was that the baby? Yes. Oh. The word came out choked. Oh, Eleanor. He spent the next hour with his hand on her stomach, waiting for every tiny movement, his face full of such wonder that Eleanor's heart ached. This man, this rough rancher, who'd been so alone for so long, was going to be a father. And he was going to be magnificent at it. Winter came early that year, sweeping down from the mountains with teeth and claws. Garrett hired 2 ranch hands brothers from Texas, named Jake and Sam, who didn't mind working for a boss with a fearsome reputation. They helped with the cattle, the endless repairs, the preparation for months of snow and ice. Eleanor was grateful for their presence. As her pregnancy progressed, she grew slower, more tired. The work that had been manageable became exhausting. She hated admitting it, but Garrett had been right to hire help. By December, she was as round as a pumpkin and just as ungainly. She couldn't see her feet, couldn't mount Silver without help, couldn't sleep comfortably no matter how many pillows Garrett arranged for her. I'm huge, she complained one morning, struggling to button a dress that had fit last week. You're beautiful, Garrett said. I'm a whale. You're carrying my baby. That makes you beautiful. He came up behind her, his hands settling on her swollen stomach. The baby kicked against his palms, and he smiled. See, the baby agrees with me. The baby's biased. Damn right they are. He kissed her neck. Come on, let's get you fed. Baby needs to eat, even if you don't feel like it. He'd become even more protective as her due date approached. Eleanor understood why childbirth was dangerous, and they both knew it. Women died in childbirth every day, especially on the frontier where doctors were scarce and help was far away. They didn't talk about it. but the fear hung between them like smoke. In late January, Eleanor woke to pain. Not the vague discomfort she'd been feeling for days, but sharp, rhythmic pain that took her breath away. "Garrett," she gasped. He was awake instantly. "What's wrong?" "The baby. I think—" Another contraction cut her off. Garrett went white. "Now, but it's too early. You said February." "Babies come when they want to." Eleanor tried to smile through the pain. "Get the supplies ready, and send Jake for the midwife." "The midwife's in town. That's 4 hours there and back, and there's snow. Then you'll have to deliver the baby yourself." Garrett looked like she'd asked him to cut off his own arm. "Eleanor, I can't—" "You can. You've delivered calves and foals. This is the same." "It's not the same. It's you." His voice cracked. "What if something goes wrong? What if I hurt you, or the baby? Or—" Eleanor grabbed his hand. "Garrett Stone, you are the most capable man I've ever met. You can do this. We can do this. Together." He took a shaking breath. Together. Together. The next 12 hours were the longest of Eleanor's life. The pain came in waves, each one worse than the last. Garrett stayed with her the whole time, his face pale, but his hands steady. He brought water when she asked, held her. When she needed support, talked her through each contraction with a calm he clearly didn't feel. "You're doing so good," he murmured during a particularly bad one. "So damn good, Eleanor." "I'm dying," she gasped. "You're not dying. You're bringing our baby into the world." He wiped sweat from her forehead. "And you're the bravest person I've ever known." By evening, Eleanor was exhausted. The contractions were closer together now, harder, and she could feel the baby moving down. Garrett had sent Sam to town hours ago, but there was still no sign of the midwife. "I can see the head," Garrett said, his voice tight. "Eleanor, you need to push." She pushed, screamed, pushed again. The pain was unlike anything she'd imagined, tearing her apart from the inside. "That's it," Garrett encouraged. "One more. Come on, love. One more push." Eleanor gathered every ounce of strength she had left and pushed. Something gave way, and suddenly the pressure eased. A baby's cry filled the room, thin and angry and beautiful. "It's a girl," Garrett said, his voice breaking. "Eleanor, we have a daughter." He placed the baby on Eleanor's chest. This tiny, perfect thing they'd made together. Eleanor's hands shook as she touched her daughter's face, counted her fingers, marveled at the dark hair plastered to her tiny head. "She's perfect," Eleanor whispered. "She's got your nose," Garrett said. Tears streamed down his face unchecked. "And my eyes, I think. It's hard to tell." The baby's cries quieted as she found Eleanor's breast. Garrett watched, transfixed, as their daughter nursed for the first time. "What do we name her?" Eleanor asked. Garrett thought for a moment. "Grace. After you. Grace Stone." "Grace?" Eleanor repeated. The name felt right. "Hello, Grace. Welcome to the world." The midwife arrived an hour later to find everything already done. She checked both Eleanor and the baby, pronounced them healthy, and complimented Garrett on his delivery skills. "You did good, Mr. Stone. Real good." After she left, Eleanor lay in their bed with Grace sleeping in the cradle beside her, and Garrett sprawled in a chair he'd pulled close. He hadn't let go of Eleanor's hand since the birth, like he needed the physical connection to believe they were both all right. "You scared me," he said quietly, "hearing you in pain and knowing there was nothing I could do to stop it." "You did everything. You got us through it." "No, you got us through it. I just watched." He leaned forward, pressed his forehead to her hand. "I've never been so scared in my life, Eleanor. When you screamed when I saw the blood, I thought—" His voice broke. "I thought I was going to lose you. But you didn't. I'm here. We both are." Eleanor squeezed his hand. and we're going to be fine." He lifted his head, and the love in his eyes made her breath catch. "I meant what I said in those letters. Every word. You gave me everything I'd stopped believing I could have: a home, a family, someone to love. You took a chance on a giant who scared everyone he met, and you made him human again. You were always human, Garrett. You just needed someone to see it." He stood, leaned over the bed, and kissed her gently. "Thank you. For coming here. For staying. For giving me her." He glanced at Grace, sleeping peacefully in her cradle. "For giving me everything." Eleanor pulled him down beside her. He stretched out carefully, mindful of her exhausted body, and wrapped an arm around her waist. "We should sleep," she murmured, "while we can." "Yeah." But neither of them closed their eyes. They lay there watching their daughter sleep, listening to her tiny breaths, marveling at the miracle of her existence. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and quiet, blanketing the ranch in white. Inside, the fire crackled in the hearth, and 3 hearts beat in rhythm: man, woman, and child. This was what Garrett had promised Eleanor all those months ago in his letters. Not just a house or land or security, but a home. A place where she belonged, where she was loved, where she mattered. He'd kept his word, every single promise. And as Eleanor drifted toward sleep, Grace's tiny hand wrapped around her finger, and Garrett's steady breathing in her ear, she realized something. She'd crossed half a country to find a husband expecting nothing more than survival. What she'd found instead was everything: partnership and passion, struggle and strength, and a love that had been tested by drought and storm and fear, and had emerged unbreakable. She'd found home. Not in Montana's endless sky or prairie grass, but in the arms of a man who'd promised to protect her, and had done something better: he'd set her free. Free to be strong, to be scared, to be fully herself, without apology. The giant cowboy who'd waited on that dusty platform had seemed like a terrifying stranger. Now he was everything: husband, father, partner, home. Eleanor pressed closer to Garrett's warmth, listened to their daughter's peaceful breathing, and knew with bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. This was the life she'd chosen. Hard and honest and real. Built not on fantasy or convenience, but on trust and work, and the kind of love that didn't crumble when tested. Garrett stirred beside her, his hand tightening protectively on her waist even in sleep. Always protecting, always careful, always hers. Eleanor smiled into the darkness and let herself fall. She was home.